again, beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of the Make Mental podcast. We have a very special guest for you today, one that I have been excited about for quite some time. We have on an entrepreneur, a mentor, a coach, a fear expert, as we will dive into here in a little bit. We have on the fear guy, Ben Harris. Thank you so much for joining the Make Mental podcast.
Yeah, bro, I feel like we need like an air horn. Burn, 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 burn. I should just bring one.
Yes, if I was
Dumb
skilled enough to
front.
use the platform we're recording on, there is a little air horn. So if you give me like 2 seconds,
There is.
let's see if I can. Well, there's laughing, cheering. Let's see what we got. Let's see if there's an air horn. No air horn. All right, well, we got to hit something now. Cheering. Here we go. Let's see if we'll... Ben Harris, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. Is. You know,
I'm
horrible.
You've all been waiting for me, even though you have no idea who I am.
We might need a director to help us out with that next time. But yes, Ben Harris, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Caleb. Appreciate it, bro.
So, you've kind of heard my like Cliff Notes spiel of Ben, but I always am curious, Ben, how would you introduce yourself? Who is Ben Harris?
Go Global is a free-flowing technology company that handcrafts, embellishes, and manufactures garments and accessories. Designed on the principles of people, places, and possibilities, Go Global reimagines fashion and is inspired by you, the people of the world.
Who is Ben Harris? That can be such an easy or existential question. I mean, dude, like on the surface level, you know, I'm someone who has always loved. This might sound weird to some people, but I really have always loved fear. Even when I didn't know I knew it was fear, I love just to push my edge and do things that were uncomfortable. And then once I realized it was fear, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Like I've heard people say that, you know, everything you desire is on the other side of fear. And like to be successful, you got to, you know, do scary things. And then I was 19 when I realized that. And I just started doing everything I was afraid of. Like, and at the time I was actually a hip hop artist. So that's a usually cool, lesser known fact that most people don't realize about me, that I was all in on it too. Like we performed with like, you know, like ASAP Rocky, we performed with like Tyga and G-Eazy and like so many other cool, even just like underground people. And that was, you know, my first love. That honestly, music gave me my first introduction into doing scary things. Because I was terrified to perform, but I didn't want to do anything else. Like it's still my favorite thing in the world. And so, yeah, man, I mean, I've spent a long time studying and getting experiences with fear. Now it's been 5 years since I've, you know, been doing this full time, and I've helped over 1,000 people work through their fears. And so I've, you know, of course, I'm always still learning, and I think the masters are always learning. But at this point, I actually wrote this line today because I'm going to do a coaching certification, and just because I feel like it's at that time where I've helped enough people and I have a method, a formula. I've seen people go through it enough times. I'm like, man, I got to give this formula to other leaders and coaches and healers and stuff like that. And even just like parents, you know, just like want to just be a better human and understand humans on a different level. And so that's it. That's like kind of me with fear, but also, you know, I'm a loving partner. I'm a husband or father of one. And you were mentioning before we started recording about all the different things you love to do. Like a new thing I found a newfound love is gardening. I live in Austin, Texas, and you know, it gets warmer earlier here. And so been gardening. We've already harvested some things, which has been fun. We're recording this on May 13th. And so like, yeah, like I love working out. I love being in the sun. I was just in Florida for 2 weeks. I love the beach. I love chilling too. so yeah, like I'm a multidimensional human, and someone who loves fear. Like I really do mean that. Like I love fear and like what it can do for people.
I'm always so fascinated. I mean, fear is such a wide range topic, right? It could be anything from like spiders to snakes to
Yeah.
like the eating disorder episodes that we have to fear foods. Those were just
Yes.
anything, right? When you say you focus on fear, do you focus on those physical fears that we can see and avoid, like snakes and spiders, or is this more internal fears where we have some sort of something blocking our self-confidence or our best version of self?
Yeah, that's mostly what it is. Like, yeah, the internal emotional, like fear, projection, failure, judgment, abandonment, all that fun stuff. And it's like, so yeah, that is what I focus on. But even like, interestingly enough, right? Like you mentioned the eating disorders, and even like a spider, right? Like, of course, you could link it to like, a fear of death, but all fear is the anticipation of pain. That's all it is. It's a biological response to be like, shoot, something bad's going to happen. Our body feels it and tells us to get out of it or to avoid it. And like, that's all fear is on a very simple level, is the anticipation of pain. And so like why I'm doing, it's, I'm controlling my environment with food is because I'm trying to avoid pain. That's all it is.
That's fascinating. I mean, I'm not disagreeing. I'm trying to kind of soak that in for a second because I have obviously become more well versed in the world of mental health and trying to think if it obviously it's not that simple. Otherwise, mental health wouldn't be such a giant topic. But what if it actually is that simple? Is that what you're proposing?
I mean, it's both.
Okay.
Right? Where it's like, yes, it's that simple, but it's like human minds are incredibly complicated. And everyone has a unique story, right? So it's like, yeah, someone could take that away and like, oh, cool, like fear is the anticipation of pain. And I could tell you that also fear reveals what you desire, So it's like, okay, like an example I like to use is if my son were to run in the middle of the street chasing after a ball, I get scared that he's going to get hurt, right? Because I love him and I care about him. So when I feel fear, it's actually just revealing how much I care about something. So if I'm afraid of public speaking or using my voice or voicing my opinion, whatever it is, it's like I actually just really care about being heard. Like I want people to respect and value me. That's all it is. And so it's like you can know those things, but yes, applying them is a different story.
Yeah, that's where my mind goes next, right? It's one thing, awareness is usually the first step in a lot of mental health journeys. And then a lot of people, myself included, for the longest time, and even still with some of the things I'm working through, are still at that awareness stage. And we're just stuck on such a repetitive cycle of get up, acknowledge the problem. I say problem loosely, acknowledge the struggle or the whatever you're going through, right? Sometimes we relapse, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we are proud of ourselves for having the strength to ignore it once or twice that we think, oh, we can do it again. And then before we know it, I'll just use me as an example. I'm staying up till 2 a.m. on my phone again. And I'm just like, why am I not tired? Well, there's a screen in front of my face. I don't care if it's on night mode. I'm still like, you know what I mean? Like that's a very baseline one, but I'm aware of it. Why is it that I guess I'll speak personally here, why I can be aware of that, but I might not be able to fix it? Is that related to my fear of sleep, I guess? I don't know. Let's unpack that for a second.
So, yeah, I mean, like what I would look at, like the first question I would ask you is like, what benefit do you get from staying up?
I couldn't tell you. Just the fact that I'm not tired yet, and I feel like it's the only downtime I have, so I might as well use it awake.
There you go. So it's the only downtime you have. So it's like, what are you losing by going to sleep early?
I mean, lately, 2 hours of running the Make Mental podcast Instagram. Other than that, not much else. I'm losing sleep.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's like, so like, of course you were losing sleep, right? But like, so what I'm referring to is just like, there's always, it's not just as simple as like, I want to sleep. Why aren't you sleeping? It's like, dude, like, of course there are like literal chemical things, right? Like when did you drink caffeine and all that like stuff that there's not just like a magic pill or a magic bullet for everybody. But in my world, that is, worked for all the people that I've worked with, is we have, conflicting parts and conflicting desires. So yes, of course, there's a part of you that wants to go to sleep, but there's also a subconscious part of you that wants to stay awake, right? So it's like, what I'm guessing, even just before you hit record, just the tiny little bit that I know about you, right, is like, um, it's like a sense of control, right? So it's like, if I stay up, I can control my environment. Is like, I don't want to go to sleep and feel like I wasted another day, or I don't want to go to sleep because then this is could be way deep down the subconscious, but then I have to wake up and do the thing again. Kind of like even what you mentioned right up, like the struggle. So there's so many subconscious and unconscious things we might not even be aware that are happening. So I asked that question, right? Like, what's the benefit? Like, a lot of people don't realize, no, there's a part of you that wants to suffer because it's predictable, because you can control it. Back to like even the eating disorder thing, right? It's like, it's obvious, like, no, I don't want to do that. That is hurting my body. But there's a part of you that doesn't want to do it too, because maybe you feel, maybe you get more attention that way. Maybe you feel like it's not as much pain, but you can control the pain and like disperse it. So there's a lot of subconscious and unconscious benefits to not doing the thing that you want to be doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, and I appreciate your response on that. Are you familiar with the book? I think it's right here. Now that I think about it, The Fear of Being Disliked.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Some of what you're saying is kind of what's in that book. Not, I mean, word for word, obviously, but the fact that we choose certain things even when we don't think we do. I think the teacher is talking to the student. I think that's the dialogue referred to, and he's saying like, you choose to be in your room, or his friend, I think it was the student's friend, chose to be in his room away from society because he was afraid of making a true connection. And the student was like, no, he can't make a connection, so therefore he has to sit in his room. It's like one of those things, right? I think I think both the student and the teacher are right in that scenario. Just personal opinion. I think it's, yes, the student's friend has faced rejection enough times that is a true fear of his, is going out into the world and being rejected again. But on the flip side, the teacher is right, because he is physically choosing to stay in his room to avoid rejection.
Correct.
When we think of it that way, and I think that's exactly, well, not my take was, that's kind of what you were speaking about. When we think of it that way, let's talk about, and I guess this is still mental health, but not necessarily the mental health that we focus on a ton on this podcast, of like the big disorders or the kind of the overarching things we see in society. I'm talking about on an individual basis now. If we are driven people, most of us that listen to this podcast are athletes, right? Why is it that as soon as our sport is gone, we're lost and just afraid and don't even know what we're afraid of?
I love it, bro. Let's go here. So I just got off the call before this podcast, and I was talking to this, it's the same. I mean, just to give a different example of like a business owner, like he just sold, I'm not sure how much he sold for, but it could have been millions of dollars, and why he sold his businesses is because he was tired. He was burnt out, and he's like, okay, like the answer is I got to sell this. I got to get rid of this. But his problems have only increased because he's now has more time to think about it. So like the problem isn't the business, and the problem isn't the sport. It's like I was even coaching a while, like a month or so ago, like an Olympic athlete. And, it's like the root of it is like, because that sport is your perceived worth and value. So if you lose that thing, then you think that you lose your worth, value as a human. Like that's pretty much, and it's your identity. It literally feels like an ego death is real. Like you have to grieve that. Like it's not just like woo woo stuff. Like this is like absolutely real. Like you can listen to like no matter what level you've been at as an athlete. Like I've listened to, like do you know who JJ Redick is? In NBA, like his podcast has blown up recently, and like I heard him talking about how like it was really hard at first, and then obviously his podcast is fulfilling the purpose within him and all that fun stuff. But it's like, yeah, like if you feel like your worth and value, and there's other things too, like are in this one thing and that goes away, of course you're going to feel lost.
Yeah, I have never personally listened to JJ Redick's podcast, but just from the 20-second thing you just told me, I think that's almost what happened to me, man. I think,
Yeah.
and I've said it before on other episodes, and one where someone else questioned me about why we started over here at Make Mental, but I think obviously COVID was horrific for a lot of people and a lot of families, and I caught COVID once, maybe twice. I don't know. I that's a blank part of my memory for a little bit there. 11 days in a room, but I think it also provided me with just time, and I think that's, again, we've talked about this before the episode. We've talked about it here at the beginning quite a bit. It forced me to slow down and just exist and not worry about when practice was. I still had responsibility, right? I still had to cook for myself. I still had homework, like all that fun stuff. But I wasn't forced, and I say forced, but I chose it ultimately to go to practice, to go to the gym, to hang out with friends, to go get ice cream, to go out on the weekends. Like, it just freed up so much time. Then I sat here and said, wait a minute, this is what life's going to be like when my sport ends. It doesn't matter if I play rec. It doesn't matter if I play semi-pro, pro, whatever. Like, at some point, my body's not going to be able to handle the thing that I've identified with, I think is what you've called it, for 20 some odd years. I was fortunate enough to get that experience before I left my sport. And that was life changing for me. And I think comes with its own set of unique struggles. It's almost like I described it as like Scrooge, like I'm just floating above myself, looking down. But I got to unpack that with my therapist some more probably. But for you at 19, because that is, I discovered this at 21, 22, and I still felt, I was in that point in my life where I felt old enough to know what the hell I was doing. But then looking back at it, I'm like, I still don't know what the hell I'm doing. But for as a teenager to discover this notion of, to achieve your wildest dreams, the first step is to stomp on fear a little bit. How has that been since? Like, did we fail along the way? Did we gain new fears? Did we get over some fears? Can we start probably at 19 and like walk us forward to how you've been doing?
For sure, bro. So yeah, all of the above. So like, the first fear that like I actually utilized that for was like freestyle rapping. So I was terrified of it because I wasn't good at it, to be honest. And it wasn't something I'd practiced or really even been interested in. But as soon as I thought of something, I was like, oh, that's what I'm afraid of. So, okay, I need to do it. To me, it was just like an easy calculation. Like, if I'm afraid of it, yes, I'm doing it. And so, yeah, like most of those at the beginning were just like music related. Like, I'm afraid of performing or submitting the music to this or even saying it like this or, and so it just meant like, yeah, I had to do it. And then like once I slowed down with music and went into the corporate world and even like school. So like I went back to school and like got a business degree, and I remember being scared to like and nervous to raise my hand in class. And so I made a deal with myself. I was like, I'm going to be the first person to like, when it's time to present, I'm always going to be the first person to raise my hand. So like even just stuff like that, right? It was just like little mini challenges. And then eventually I realized, and mine actually happened during the pandemic. I had already quit my job to do something. I actually quit to do a podcast. And then I realized in March 2020, ironically enough, when the world is in fear, that's when I realized my gift is actually in fear. And so I had spent, 10 years, more than 10 years. I think, yeah, more than 10, like just getting in this rhythm and practice. And I just was like, why is everyone so stuck in like what they're afraid of? That's literally like fear is showing you where to go if you want to grow. It's like a goalpost. Like you got to do the thing or else you just kind of like what you mentioned with the fear of being disliked book is like you were so afraid of rejection that you're actually going to reject yourself before anyone else can do it. And then what actually happens, right, is it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then you feel miserable, you feel inadequate, you feel like you're not enough, but it's not the other people doing it, it's you to yourself. And so I just kind of realized that, and I was like, whoa, like this isn't, not a lot of people know this or are at least doing this. And so I rebranded everything within a week or two once I got that download, and it just changed like everything. And of course there's endless fears, like getting into a relationship, becoming a father, starting a business, like how to run the business, and like endless, like, dude, being an entrepreneur, being in a relationship, and being a parent is like the trifecta of a constant mirror in your face of just like, where I feel like I just believe fear reveals where I'm not free. So it's just like if I feel anxiety, then it's I don't take it as, I mean, of course I still take it personally, like who am I kidding? But I've gotten a lot better at like not taking it as personally and just taking it as information of like, okay, this is just my body, responding, my mind responding to something that it feels unfamiliar with. And that's my clue to lean in and to become more familiar with it. Um, and so, yeah, dude, I mean, there's a lot of fears we can go into, but there's a rough umbrella view of it all.
Yeah, I appreciate that overview. And I think, I mean, music. Come on now. Can you spit some bars? No, I'm kidding. But I think the ones you mentioned of your family, right? And you talked about how you can combat your fear of public speaking potentially with raising your hand and being the first to present. When the fears become that much more personal, how do you get yourself to walk towards those? Because obviously you can sit in a classroom and raise your hand, you can sign up for a public speaking event, you can take a course somewhere, right? You can't just experiment on your family without consequences, I mean, I'm not suggesting you do, I'm not suggesting you don't.
Yeah.
Actually, I am kind of suggesting you don't, but how do you personally kind of get yourself more comfortable with those fears?
Dude, I mean, yeah, like you said, right? It's like you can't really plan for it. I mean, I tried, but it's still just like you don't know what you don't know. Um, but I mean, it's so many lessons. Like I remember, yeah, like I remember when my son was first born, and one of the first thoughts I remember was like, oh, I get it. I get why parents sacrifice everything. Like literally, it's in our biology, but also like emotionally, like you care so much for this other person. Like, of course, you're going to sacrifice your dreams and like do all these things and yada, yada, yada. Right. And so I remember like, oh, like I'm so scared of him struggling. But also, that was just, within that same moment, I realized like, oh, but then it's like, in that moment, I was like, should I go get another job, like something more, stable and stuff like that? And then my immediate response to that was like, no, like it's actually my duty to do what I'm doing, to show him what is possible and to live like live from my heart and my truth, like not to live from fear. Um, and so, I mean, and even just like another example, yesterday was like him on the playground. I remember, and like, like, cause he's getting more confident and he can climb higher and like he's leaning over the edge and like obviously if he falls, he's breaking something. And like, I'm like literally just like focusing on my breath. Like that's all I can do. Like, cause I want him to explore, and like push his edge, but it's also as my job as a parent to keep him safe. But I don't want to like instill, um, like, yeah, like, fear is like, we need some of it. It's there to keep us alive, but I don't want him to be just, overly cautious. So it's like, just like, helping him be intentional with like, and at the same time, focusing on my breath. And I was just kind of laughing because even in that moment, I realized like I recognized I was like, I'm feeling fear right now. Like in my body, I'm scared that my son is gonna fall. Like, and that's okay. So it's literally just like sometimes all we need is just like focus on our breath.
Yeah, I appreciate the breath work point. I think there was like a mini triangle of steps that you followed there. That's just kind of the way that my logical brain saw it. I don't know if this has any real life application or if it's actually some sort of technique, but I saw like we said, an awareness, a recognition piece. You didn't just sit with that recognition. We're like, hey, my son could fall. Like you sound like a robot if you did that, right? You were like, okay, maybe I focus on my breath and take 2 steps closer in case he does fall.
Yes.
So I can be there to catch him, right? Do my best, but not say, hey, back away from the ledge unless he's 60
Exactly.
stories up on a building without a window. All right. It's all situational.
Yeah.
But I saw
Yes.
that three-step pattern of recognition. I'll call it conversation, that conversation with yourself, that breath work, and then that action. Is
Bro,
there
I love that.
is there
Let's
is that
form that together right now.
Is that like a subconscious recipe that you've trained yourself to do?
Dude,
Is that always the
no.
case, or is it like, is it just something that you have to, again, experience time and time again? Because you can't plan for that, right? And you don't go setting your son up to fall off a ladder or anything like that's just bizarre. But in those moments, those unpredictable moments where you have no control, because we also say like sometimes to gain control you have to lose control, right? It's that sometimes to get beyond your fears you have to experience them. Do you argue it's something you just have to experience enough times and honestly fail at enough times to get good at, or is there a trick maybe that we can say, okay, this is how I can experience this failure less?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, I mean, it's like, I think first off, I just want to say, like, honestly, we need to go back to that triangle and the recognition, the conversation, the action. That's really good. And then I would say this fourth, if it's a square, is like the letting go. You know, like there's
Yeah.
only so much you can do.
How crucial is that piece to the fear
Oh, dude,
journey?
I mean, it's everything, right? Because it's like I've even had conversations, right, where it's like I want to be the best parent, but it's like I can't be. There's no way I can be perfect, nor do I want to be. Um, and just keep showing up for myself and for him, like in a loving way, and like repair and forgive and all that stuff. And I guess that even goes into the question we're talking about of like it's literally impossible to not fail or to not make a mistake. And so like releasing the idea of imperfection. I mean, what perfectionism really is, right, is a fear of not being good enough, or is a fear of making mistakes, and the need to control that. So you know, so it's like
That might be
it's like
that might be the trick that we need, is the letting go piece.
yeah. I mean, it's like I mean, dude, it's a constant dance, right? Like I'm always dancing with like how much can I control because of my mind and my actions and my diligence and creation abilities versus like obviously I'm one measly human like on a floating rock in space. That's literally it's like, dude, like it's the beautiful paradox of being human is like I'm literally made of the same thing that is made of the earth and the universe, but at the same time, like I'm one of 7 something billion people. And no, like, so it's like, it is like that, the total dance of like, I'm absolutely in control of my life. And at the same time, I can't control anything.
Yeah, man. I mean I can relate there where you're control of your life, but then you can't really you can't really control it, right? Like it's like the driving on the road theory, right? Like you can drive your car
Yeah.
forward, you just got to trust that everyone else on the other side of the road wants to stay in their lane as well, and
It
if
is
they,
weird, right? Like,
yeah, I thought
there's
about
like
that actually on the
lines
way
in the
home
road.
today. I was like, I'm driving, right? I don't want to get in a crash, and I hope everyone else on the other side of the road doesn't want to get in a crash here. Like, because I was in the middle lane there to turn left, and I was like, we're only 3 feet away from each other. If someone
Yeah.
looks down, it's not that they want to get in a crash here. That's probably a horrible choice of words. So we're not going to edit that out, but please don't quote that one. If they look at their phone, right? If they get distracted, if an animal comes out, like you
Yeah.
can't control that. But yet we still choose to get in the car and drive. I'm a huge fan of taking things that we already do in our life and then relating them to our mental state, right? You
Yep.
already have gotten over the fear of a lot of us. Maybe it's a real rational fear for some people, but the majority of the world gets over the fear of a car crash. We get in an airplane. We control that action of getting in the airplane and we trust the pilot to get us there. What is it in our own mind that holds us back from trusting ourselves to get over our fears that once you do seem so irrational?
That's a beautiful question, dude. And like you said it, right? It's like the lack of self-trust. And even when, like, if people do have a phobia of driving a car, right? It's the same thing. It's the lack of self-trust, right? It's like, I don't trust myself that I can maneuver, or I don't trust myself that I can handle an injury, right? Or like something like that. Like, and that can get pretty metaphysical really quick, right? Like if you want to just like trusting God and all that fun stuff. But like if we just stick to like the humanness of it is oh,
Even
man, dude,
even
I
for
mean,
getting in a car though, I'm going to kind of push back here a little bit.
yeah.
For getting in a car, I mean I know people that trust themselves enough to drive the car. They're just afraid of someone else in a different car. Does that still have something to do with a lack of self-confidence or something within? Is maybe they don't
I
trust
mean,
someone else?
yeah, I mean, like, yeah, you think about it, right? Is like you can even relate this back to like a relationship. It's like you can't control what someone else is going to do, but they can still hurt you. But it's like fear is the anticipation of pain, right?
Mm.
So
So it's
I
that
don't trust
overarching
myself to
theme
handle
then.
that.
Okay.
I can't handle that consequence because
Okay.
I don't. I mean, and this is slippery, right? Because it's like we don't want to think and like focus on these things and create this, but at the same time, is like part of my work is like going to the place that you don't want to go, and then you realize, oh, it's not so bad, and then you stop worrying about it because the more you worry about it, you actually focus on it. Like there's a mechanism in your brain called the reticular activating system, and it's literally designed to look for the evidence to prove whatever you believe to come true. So like sticking with the car example, and some of you might have heard this, is like for example, one of my friends not too long ago, he bought a Toyota RAV4, a very common car that literally is everywhere on the road. But as soon as he bought that, I saw them everywhere. And I didn't before because my subconscious didn't need to recognize the pattern. But as soon as my friend bought the car, that car became important and I recognized that pattern. So the same thing happens with our brain, right? Where it's like we are looking for a familiar pattern that we've deemed important or familiar for whatever reason. And so that's why I mean, you can take this in a lot of ways of like going back to the rejection piece of like, if I believe that I'm not good enough, like it doesn't matter. And I mean, as an athlete, you can relate to this too, right? Of like, I like and we're trained to like always go like it's never ever ever good enough. I always have to be better. So you're literally trained to always believe like it's not good enough. And so it doesn't matter how good something is, your brain is trained to look to cherry pick. Even if you have 10 like nine good things and one bad thing, you're not going to see the nine things. You're going to pick the one bad thing to validate your belief system. So it's crazy, dude, how the brain works, but it's like it's a constant practice and to look where you want to go because it's and I mean this is crazy all the different car examples that are coming through that we're talking about this, but like even I remember hearing one time like when a race car driver, if literally I mean they're going so fast, granted, but like if they look at the wall, like the chances increase like significantly that they're going to hit the wall versus like looking where they're going to go. Same thing when you tell a kid like, "Hey, don't hit the trash can." They're going to hit the trash can, you know? So it's like because our brains are wired, we we value negativity more than positivity because negativity threatens our survival. So negativity on our hierarchy is like
Yeah, and I get pretty excited to receive $100, so I must hate spending money over here. No, I'm kidding. Everyone in my life will argue otherwise, and Dunkin' Donuts will probably argue way otherwise if you look at my bill. But I couldn't help but smiling a lot in the middle of this episode because, like you said, as an athlete, that's something we can relate to a ton, right? We're always told to visualize the game. And even when coach says visualize the positive stuff in the game, the first three visuals I have are me messing up. And then I really have to focus and say, no, like, of course there's a chance you mess up, dude. Like, you're going to mess up during the game. But you've been put in this situation 10, 20, 30, 40 times. Like, visualize those 28 out of the 30 times that you've done it right. Don't focus so much on the two. But now that you say that, I'm like, wait a minute. That we go automatically to negative. I didn't even realize. I'm like, I did. I focused on missing to that penalty kick more times than I focused on making it. Like, so I couldn't help but relate to that in the middle of the episode. And then I'm going to talk to the listeners directly here for a second. If you're in this episode yourself, your mind has been set on fear for a while and you might not even have realized it just because of the nature of the guest we have on. And if it's not fear, it's on mental health, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't end up on our podcast. Maybe someone in your life, someone you know is struggling with mental health, is struggling with fear. Like there is some sort of connection there, whether you realize it or not. You don't just stumble onto the podcast. even if you want to blame your phone's algorithm, you don't come to the fear guy without your phone knowing that you're afraid of something. Okay, but that's a little bit more voodoo than we need to get into in this episode. But I just find it so fascinating that our brains automatically defend ourselves from the negative, but you really can't get away from that. But we don't always let ourselves experience the positive, and I think that's where the stuckness happens, for lack of better terms, that we all feel. And again, I am no expert in this field, which is why we have on Ben. Would you say, for you, I guess we'll start there, when you started your reframing your mindset from obviously recognizing the negatives, but then to experiencing the positives, I hear a lot. It's like, don't experience the lows too low or the highs too high.
Yeah.
Is that something you tend to do, or are you like, give me all the highs in the world and I'll deal with the lows as they come?
Dude, that's a great question. So I feel like my natural tendency, and also with my upbringing, that trained me to disassociate from my feelings, which means like I'm really good. I'm a chill person, so it's like I like everyone. I remember back in my corporate days, everyone was just like something so bad could happen, and I was good, like just steady, like reliable. And same thing with like a good thing, So it's taken a lot of training and practice for me to actually, like the past year or so, I mean longer, but really the past year I've been like focused on like, let me just like feel. Like I remember in 2020 I was nomadic and I was in California, and I remember staying at this Airbnb. This was like June, like prime pandemic. I remember like helicopters flying overhead because of like the protests and everything. That's just a side note. But I remember like in this Airbnb, like I stepped with my barefoot on the grass and I was like, ooh, like that's rough. Like, let me get off. And then because I was trying to practice feeling more, I was like, oh, wait a minute, wait a minute. Let me just literally step on this grass and just like, can I just like actually feel the coarse pokiness of the grass? And then I did that. And then I didn't even realize it, but subconsciously later in that day, I was walking on the grass and didn't even realize that it was pokey. And I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. Like, and so it's still so much practice, right? I'm just like inch by inch, like expanding my capacity for more and more feeling. It's not like all of a sudden, all the time, like my emotions just open, it's especially as, I mean, as males, as athletes, and even just, I mean, straight up humans, like we are, you kind of joked about being computers, but we're pretty good at training ourselves to be emotionless computers and just output and like produce. Yeah. It's a thing. Yep. No, that's real for sure. Mm. Mm. Yes. Oh, I love that. No. Yeah, cool. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, dude. I mean, that's a great question. And it's, this life is a constant dance of ebbs and flows. I mean, I've fallen into that too, right? Of like, and I just want to highlight what you said of like, it's the purposeful delegation of letting go, or what'd you say? Mm, cool. I like that. And it's like, yeah, a lot of people tend to think letting go or surrender, right? Like giving up is weakness, or it is like apathetic, and like not caring. But I view it as like the opposite. Like, to me, true surrender and letting go is like you are so intimate with life that you are willing to let go, right? As like, I can just like drop the mic, and I don't need to grip onto the steering wheel so hard and like, with white knuckling it all the time. Because it's, some people would say apathy or spiritual bypassing, when it's like you say like I'm letting go, but really it's just you're actually not engaged with the feeling. And like, again, this is so individual per the person and per the situation. I'm big on nuance. Like, I don't believe in black and white thinking, just because there's so many scenarios. um, and so it's like, for me, is it's like real courage, and it's like really being self-aware and engaged with, am I choosing to let go, or am I actually avoiding something? Because, and it's like, it's the same, dude, it's just like literally like a sliver of a difference, right? Where you can just come back, you can literally just ask yourself, like, am I avoiding something by not caring and by letting go? Does that mean I need to engage more? And as a business owner, this is something I've had to dance a lot with like even sales, right? Like, how much do I push and how much do I care about sales versus just letting go because I can't control people's decisions? And it's a, it's like, to me, it's like I just have to come back to like, am I doing absolutely everything I can that's in my power? And after that, I just trust and know that it's like, I'm not gonna overly, grip or grasp or something like that. But it just comes back to, for me, asking me, yeah, the question like, am I avoiding something? Um, and I'm guessing people can probably resonate to that, because you can just know, like, as soon as you ask yourself that question, if you kind of like get uncomfortable, then you're avoiding something. It's like, if you shifted in your seat when I asked that question while you're driving or something, like, you are avoiding something. And just to be 100% transparent, is like, we're all avoiding something.
Oh
We're just
yeah.
we're just unconscious of what we're avoiding. So it's just
I
like
mean,
going
sometimes
on
I'm
to the
consciously avoiding it and I don't even care. So I'll throw that out there. That's okay too.
yeah. And so it's just like, yeah, there's like being compassionate with yourself, and like understanding that is, you're always like, our consciousness and awareness is always expanding. So it's like, we kind of alluded to this earlier, right? But like, every single choice or every single thing that we have in our life is because of a choice we've made. It might not feel like a choice because it's been an unconscious choice, right? Even like, if someone calls me a jerk, it's kind of a funny example. I don't think I would respond, because I'd be like, wait, what? Like, huh? What did you just say? Because I don't believe I'm a jerk. But if I did subconsciously feel like I was a jerk, then I would get triggered, because part of me believes that. So it's like, even though it's unconscious, it's still a conditioned response, and I'm choosing to act that way based on my conditioning and my belief system. So it's like, as we become more aware of who we are and our decisions and beliefs and brains and emotions, then we can make better decisions. It's like, and I truly believe this is like, we do the best that we can in every single moment based on the awareness that we have. And that's kind of a tricky thing, right? Because it's like, well, how do you hold people accountable and stuff like that, right? But it's like, if, to me, like, everyone who's listening to this podcast, like, there are a course of upset, like, exceptions to the rule, but I just know that anyone who's listening to this is a really good-hearted person, and you are doing your best in any given moment.
Yeah, I mean, we think so as well at Make Mental. We love our community here. But if you heard that and you're like, I don't feel like a genuine person. I don't feel like a kind-hearted person. That's why I'm listening to that seat squirm moment. That's okay. Just
Yeah.
acknowledge the feeling, right? Start there. Know that there's the feeling, and you might not know why you squirmed. You might not know why you don't feel that way.
Mm.
I think that's when you have
Yeah.
to really dig into whatever level of emotional intelligence you have, start to peel back the layers and go from there. And guess what? You might never figure out why you squirm, but that's that part, that's that acceptance, that's that letting go. In this case, we can't really call it the purposeful delegation of tasks because mine is more business oriented, my fears at the moment. But when it comes to that, when I sat with those emotions, because there was times where there's emotions that I don't know why I'm experiencing them, I don't know why I did, I don't know why I said the things I did, but they happened so long ago in the past that I can't go back and fix them now. I can only control where my feet go in the future and are in the present moment, right? If I don't like where I'm standing and I don't want to turn around, I have 180 degrees to go, right? And let's pick one of them and let's readjust accordingly. I'm curious. I'm always curious. Surprise, surprise. In a world full of gray, when you're not a black and white thinker, is there another side of fear? Like once you've conquered it, what's on the other side of fear? Or is that still too black and white for your thinking?
Good question, dude. Like I appreciate, and let me just give you a compliment of like I appreciate even just the challenging and like the conversation and not just being like whatever you say. Like I appreciate that. Like actually going into it. And so yeah, dude. I mean, it's funny. I was talking to like a group of like 80 entrepreneurs today, kind of like about this similar thing of like, and interestingly enough, it was a reverend who was turning into an entrepreneur. And he asked this question of like, I feel like I've become really good, like friends with fear, but I'm still really fearful. I'm like, well, yeah, because you might be focusing too much on it, you know? And so it's like my job, like I'll be honest, like as the quote unquote fear guy, like I've definitely gotten stuck in fear loops because it's like literally like with a name like that, you know, like I am calling it in. Like I'm calling like, and like as someone who wants to lead by example, I'm constantly meeting, acknowledging, overcoming, dissolving new fears constantly. So it's like, if you want to get into the soul level, I believe that all of us are completely fearless and just are like our frequency is full of love. But as a biological human, you're going to feel fear, right? Of like when people say be fearless, what they're really trying to say is be courageous, which is just you're going to do the thing with the fear. And I feel like there are moments of fearlessness and there are like you know when you're playing like even a sport, right? Like there are moments like you're so in the zone that like you're so present that nothing else exists. So of course there's not fear in that moment. Like you were in flow. But like we don't live in that moment constantly. So it's like
It's a
of
good
course
moment
there's
to
gonna
be in,
be,
though. If we could live in that
it's awesome.
constantly, holy crap.
But then it wouldn't be the flow.
Yeah, and you wouldn't be here talking to me.
Exactly. So it's both, right? Like it's knowing that both exist where it's like there is a current another freedom on the other side of that fear. But at the same time is like I mean I just relate to my business, you know, where I can just see like, oh, I made it to that income level and I can't believe that I like last year I made the most money I've ever made. And I was like, whoa, that's really cool. And there's still like I know there's still so much more room to go, but the energy I'm coming at it from is not like a lack place. It's not like I need to push myself to reach a ambiguous goal because I'm trying to prove my value. I'm like, I want to do it because I love it. I want to come from a place of service. I want to come from a place of wholeness and because I'm going to have fun doing it. Like I really just want to have fun what I'm doing and help people. And so like and just knowing is like, yeah, like I'm going to meet a new edge. That's like like the best athletes in the world, not saying they do it from the best energy all the time, but you still can't, you know, disregard the principle of like why does LeBron James he trains every single offseason to get better? And he's changing his game. Like as he gets older, right? He's become a much better shooter. So it's like he had to, as his body changes, he's had to adapt. And like, of course, like he's meeting a new edge. And it's just like, that's just a thing of life. Like a principle and law of life is either you're increasing or you're decreasing. It's unfortunately nothing is stagnant. Doesn't mean that you don't rest or anything. I'm not implying that. I feel like rest is productive a lot of the time, but we are increasing or decreasing. Like literally, like there is no such thing as stagnant. Like you look at nature, nothing is ever the same. Like the molecules are constantly moving. So it's like, um, yeah. So like, why I just say that, right? To wrap that up is like be compassionate for yourself. That feeling fear is just a normal human emotion, and people spend a lifetime avoiding it and feeling shameful of it and thinking it's weak or you're wrong or something and like we all have different upbringings of why we believe that, but it's literally just the same as like, oh, I feel hungry right now. Like it literally is just like a human cue. Like I feel hungry. Okay. Like that's what fear is. Like, cool. That's a response from my body from something that's occurring. So, and then just take that as information. And like one of the things I believe in is like friending your fear instead of avoiding it or hiding from it, which only makes it worse. Like the more you fight or avoid your fear, the more fearful you become. But the more you can lean into it and love it and befriend it and embrace it, the less fearful you will become. So the goal is not to become fearless, but to fear less.
Ooh, that's the one-liner we were waiting for. Come on now, Ben. Yeah, I'm not. I'm going to give up on trying to do that one. So thank you for that sound effect. I really got to get some help. I have to purposely delegate that task to someone. We'll say. When you say friend fear, that my mind goes in 100 different places, and for some reason, I saw the Facebook F and wanted to send it a friend request. I know it's not
I
quite
like that a
that
lot,
literal, but
that needs to be my logo because like I do a challenge for that. I really like that visual of like I'm going to friend fear. That's cool.
well, I get 10%. No, I'm kidding. But in all seriousness, to kind of get back to the final fear. Ooh, the final fear of the episode. When we're friending fear, does that mean we can rely on specific techniques? Does that mean we have to, again, experience for ourselves what friending fear looks like? And then this might be 3 final questions in one. What does friending fear even look like, right? I feel like that's a fear of mine, is there are too many options maybe to friend fear. There are too many social media apps which I could friend request fear on right now, right? And I don't know which one to pick. I think I'll personally pick journaling. I think I'll friend fear through journaling, right? Write out my fears. But then I'm a kind of, I'm assuming you are, I'm the opposite, where I leave a blank space under the fears that I have, because I actually do this not knowing that it's something that was a whole world of fear. I would leave a blank space, and whether it's later that day, so I do journaling a lot at night, whether it's in the morning, whether I dream up a recipe for success or something, I will go in that blank space under my fear and say, yeah, today I got over this. Today I didn't. This is how I got over it. This is how I didn't. So I can not only fill my toolbox, but I can go back and grab the hammer again if I need it, for lack of a better term. So to get back to the question, which app do we friend fear on, in your opinion? And then if we're stuck, where do we start to become more familiar with our fears?
I love that, bro. I love that exercise you do. And like, if you're just starting and if you've never done this before, it's like just starting so small and just like getting curious and just listening, just acknowledging that voice of fear is all you need to do. Like, even just asking the question, what am I afraid of, is a terrifying question. Because fear in itself is afraid of itself because it wants to survive. That's kind of a deep cut if you can understand that one. And so it's as simple as like just asking a question. It could be journaling, it could be taking a deep breath, or just feeling it, right? Like, can you, when that anxiety, like literally, so like any negative emotion can be traced back to fear, right? Because fear is our survival mechanism. So if I feel jealous, guess what that is, right? A fear of losing something, or the fear of being not enough or not having enough. If I feel nervous, what is that? Ooh, I'm also afraid of losing something or something bad happening to me, right? Like anxiety, same exact thing. Literally, what anxiety is just a chronic fear. Fear is meant to be like intense and in a short spurt, so you can, fight or run from your predator. But anxiety is just like a constant hum of fear. Like you're always looking around, or like looking around your shoulder, like feeling something's going to attack you or hurt you. And so like I would just encourage you, can you just listen to that for a moment instead of just saying like, damn it, like why do I feel this way? Why, like, is something wrong with me? Like I'm sick of this. Like, and you can feel that. Like that's actually part of you feeling it, is bringing awareness to that voice. So just adding, like giving fear like a personification or a voice to it will actually help you detach it from you, and you can actually have a conversation with it. And that's one of the things I like to do, is just like saying thank you, fear, and just like, hey, thanks, fear, for showing me like where I feel afraid. Thanks for showing me, or my next level of growth. Thanks for showing me that like I don't want to be rejected. So just like, even if it's just that little phrase and just feeling and hearing the voice of fear, that will help you a ton.
Yes. Yes. I love that so much. So many of the other guests we've had on the podcast have talked about the specific names they've given their anxieties or their depressions or whatever else they were going through. And I at the first, I'll be the first to admit, I was like, oh, this is stupid. Like, why the heck would I, like, what is it? Like a physical guy on my shoulder over here and over here. And then I talked to my therapist about it. Again, that's also a good place to start. If you need, I will say that every episode, and I'll say it every episode, but, yeah, as soon as I talked to my therapist about it, I was able to kind of do that with my anxiety and just be like, okay, give the what if a voice, right? So I named it something stupid because I like to combat my anxiety with sarcasm. And then you can see the loop there of how I fall into it. But as soon as it's that acknowledgement that you were talking about, right? She didn't tell me to write it down right away. She didn't tell me to tackle it head first, like put on my full football gear. I was ready to do it. And she was like, no, right? When you start out football, you play flag football first, right? You'll get a concussion probably. But just that acknowledgement, and I didn't even realize what it was probably up until this moment. So thank you for giving me the recognition of the acknowledgement. Holy smokes, what an episode here! But
full circle.
Yeah. Oh gosh, we're gonna have to get a counter every time that noise goes off. But I do want to kind of, before we get into the final question here, give you a second to tell us where we can find you, where we can friend you, where we can friend the fear guy on social media, and if we've enjoyed, if our listeners have really connected with you and enjoyed what they heard, how they can continue to get more advice from you and know your story.
Wow, dude, another full circle moment. Like, even though that's a joke, that's completely serious. It's like, yeah, like I've had people tell me that like, hey, I have intentionally avoided you because I haven't wanted to like face my fear, So like they're literally like, will not look at my posts on social media. So like that's just funny. And like coming into my world is friending your fear, right? Even if it's you're ready to dive in, like I do one-on-one with people. Like I work with, a range of people. I work with athletes. I work with entrepreneurs. I'm currently working, with like a 76-year-old man. So it's like, it's just so fun to like work with an array of people. But you can just find me on Instagram. It's The Fear Guy, really easy to find.
Caleb here, just to butt in really quick. Since the recording of this episode, his name on Instagram is no longer The Fear Guy. You can find him on Instagram at Break Free with Ben. That's BreakFreeWith Ben. Break Free with Ben is where you can find The Fear Guy.
I'm on LinkedIn. I've been doing LinkedIn more. It's been really fun, honestly, to step more into the corporate vibe. And yeah, I think that's it. Like if you want to I have a podcast, The Fear Alchemist. I'm not as regular on that as I used to be, but there's still so much stuff on there. You can go splurge, and that is an amazing resource. So yeah, just Google The Fear Guy, my website, or check me out on search the podcast, The Fear Alchemist.
Yeah, well, thank you for giving our listeners maybe another home base, a vacation home, I like to call it, for when they take a break from our podcast, because we need a
Yes.
break, right? It's overwhelming to hear maybe the same suggestions, or just we're all creatures of habit, right? So if we're huge proponents of, if the Make Mental isn't right for you all the time, please find the place that is, because at the end of the day, that is why we do it, to help you heal, to build your community. And if a story can save your life, well, go to the story that saved your life. And if that is Ben,
Cool.
go ahead and join him, please. But Ben, are you ready for the last question of this episode of the Make Mental podcast?
If it includes an air horn, yes.
All right, you got me to do it. No, I don't know. We'll have to see if it includes an air horn. We'll see. But I'm curious, Ben, if there is one person in the entire world right now that you would love to give a hug to, who would it be and why?
The first answer, honestly, was myself. And at first I was like, was that like a little like inner child version of me? Which is partially true, but honestly, it's like now. Like myself, for like, dude, like looking at like how far I've come, the risks that I've taken, like I'm just like everyone else, right? Like I tend to be hard on myself and look where I'm not at, or looking at the mountain that is still to climb instead of appreciating where I've come from. So yeah, like a hug for myself, and like a really heartfelt, like, you're doing freaking awesome. Like that feels really good, and I appreciate that question.
Yeah, well, thank you, and you definitely deserve the hug. So I'm glad you decided to give it to yourself, and not just default to probably the easier answer. So thank you for sitting with that uncomfortableness, that fear of giving yourself a hug. It just shows that you do practice what you preach, and you're just not out here blabbering away, But yeah, one last time, Ben, the Fear Guy, thank you so much for joining the Make Mental podcast. Again, if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a thumbs up. Do anything to help us out over here so we can continue to help you with guests such as Ben. So Ben, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, and everyone, subscribe, leave a review. Let's go.
See, that's still a fear of mine. So I'm going to get better one at a time. I'll say the thumbs up, and then we'll keep going.